I had a sudden realization the other day while I was doing the washing up. And it was like this really powerful image that we are currently living in oceans of blood. This is Pamela from Animal Justice Emergency. And I'm again drawing on Sarah Collins' Animal Resistance in the Global Capitalist Era for ideas. And so, and I'm interpreting and bouncing off from what she's got to say. These oceans of blood thing. The grotesquerie of the animal death, the animal agriculture industry is just a reinvention of past barbarisms, of settler colonialism. It's policed and enforced currently by fast food multinational corporations and human supremacist norm people, and the whole gamut of society in between. So I'm going to quote Sarah here. Quote, the introduction of grazing cows, pigs and sheep enabled the colonizers to occupy land that belonged to indigenous communities and became a central strategy of European colonization. So it wasn't an accident that cows and other animals were brought into these open, new, supposedly empty lands. It was part of a deliberate strategy that was used time and time and time again. And contrary to that sort of whole thing that we learned in primary school or secondary school about Columbus sailing the ocean blue, these brave adventurers zooming off to do amazing things and explore. It's all about exploring. It wasn't about basically sucking countries dry, other places dry, and colonizing. It was all about exploring them, wasn't it? This, I think, is a fundamental birth pang of neoliberalism and the culture of the systematic destruction and use of other species and non-white humans. Quote, beginning in the late 15th century, systematic invasions of the Americas and later of North America in the 17th century were made possible by introducing farmed animals. So again, it was very deliberate because, I mean, you would have thought your average explorer, would they be thinking, let's put, hundreds or possibly, I don't know how many cows or sheep or pigs into our boats and sort of like take them in vast numbers, thousands of miles? No. I mean, people might say, well, for food, but really, there's got to be another reason, and this was clearly it. So basically, other animals were being weaponized and clearing the land by proxy, which was totally convenient and totally global. Quote, ranching was central to Europe's colonization of the globe in the 19th century, including of Ireland, Africa, Australia, New Zealand as well. So again, this global tactic to annex land and resources, to displace other humans and free living animals, was, being rolled out for centuries. It makes you think, doesn't it? And look what happened. Quote, the dispossession and genocide of indigenous peoples intersected with those of free living and captive animals. The number of farmed animals raised by elites to be killed for consumption, both locally and for exportation, to maximize profits, often correlated with the number of humans displaced from the land. The larger the ranching population, the more violence was inflicted on the indigenous population. Wow, are we seeing some sort of a pattern emerging here? I think we are. It's the pattern of neoliberal conquest as settler colonialism. It was started then, and now we're living off the benefits and also the consequences. Likewise, in the United States, quote, as the colonizers searched the western states for grazing lands and water to raise cows, they displaced and murdered indigenous people and free living animals. And when I saw that, I was like, crumbs. It's like how the West was won. It was not about how the West was won, it was all about the money. It was always a get rich quick winner takes all scheme. The consequences are not a problem. Not a problem for the colonizers because they're just sucking everything out. Everyone else picks up the tab, the animals, both captive and free living, the indigenous people, and the ecosystems. So, quote, settlers filled the plains with large grazing animals brought over from Europe. Tens of thousands died from thirst during drought or starvation, and freezing during the harsh winters. So, tens of thousands. I mean, the numbers are absolutely colossal. And it's horrendous to realize the number of animals that were being killed there. Free living animals were trapped and hunted for skin and hair, and others, perceived as a threat to livestock operations or defined as pests, were and still are killed by poisoning, shooting, and other methods. Oops, sorry, technical hitch. Okay, other methods. Quote, bisons suffered greatly from American colonization, killed first by bison hunters like William F. Cody, Buffalo Bill, to feed exploited labouring construction crews, but later the bison were annihilated by state backed operations because they would winter in places, particularly sheltered valleys, where European Americans wanted to settle, grow crops, and establish ranching operations. So, the huge herds of buffaloes, bison that used to roam, I used to wonder why did they go? That's why they go, why they were taken away, why they were systematically annihilated in their millions, I think. For money, for space, for land, for power. Quote, oxen pulled colonizers' wagons loaded with raw bison hides and carried their goods, which included furs, skins, and flesh of other oppressed animals. Along with the culture of captive cows and the commodified bodies of free living animals killed for their furs, the labour of millions of horses and mules and hundreds of thousands of oxen was exploited for the settlement of the American West. So, this is it seemed to these words seem to sort of like coalesce a kind of like a mega level of realization, because this whole thing we have of how the West was won, it wasn't about how the West was won, it was how war was waged on innocent other beings, free living animals in their millions, indigenous people in their millions, on the environment. Systematic war. It was a war. Why isn't it called a war? To wrench control of these areas from the people and beings that already lived there, and to give it to European colonizers. And it hasn't stopped, has it? It continues to this day. And that's what I meant about the oceans of blood. It's still continuing to this day on an even vaster scale. So it's being created, this neoliberal propaganda, the dominant culture of supported by lies that basically have systematically reversed the mind-boggling criminal activities of these elites on a horrific scale, drenched in the bloods of billions of animals now, people. They sprinkled stardust over these bodies and desecrated landscape to glorify murdering thugs as heroes and freedom fighters, and the genocided as vicious and antagonistic. So the indigenous people were always the baddies, weren't they? Free living animals like wolves and coyotes are vicious and crafty and bad, and the white settlers are the heroes. Neoliberalism. It's the neoliberalism that is red in tooth and claw, not nature. Neoliberalism. So now, in the context of catastrophic climate breakdown and biodiversity loss, we, the current generation, and however many will come after us, maybe it's just your children and their children, or maybe it's going to happen sooner. There's not long. There's not long left. So we will be paying the price of the global contamination of human supremacist neoliberalism. The world is piled with corpses from mega farms, burned rainforest, and polluted rivers and seas. The neoliberal pandemic is running amok. Neither the innocent nor the guilty are exempt from the consequences of greed, selfishness, and denial because we've been sucked in. The elites have sucked us, the animals, and the entire planet dry. The only decision we need to make is to be with them or against them, for animals and fellow dispossessed, for life? Or do we sidle up to the cronies and the power lobbies and the corporates with their sick franchises of media, law, and the status quo? We are living in oceans of blood. But the waves of change are battering down the rocks of complacency. The tsunami of retribution is gathering power. Will we attempt to surf the treacherous waters with our dinghy of active resistance, or will we rearrange the deck chairs on the supertanker of neoliberal convenience and comfort, surprised at the ever-increasing numbers of bodies, other animals, trillions of fish, inestimable amounts of insects? Is our choice what we do? Joining the dots I always find is an instructive, although sometimes challenging experience. For those of you that are interested in Sarah Collins' book, she's doing a Zoom call on Tuesday the 15th of June 2021. You can find out the details on her Facebook page. I'll see if I can put a link below. As I said, I'm finding this book absolutely stunningly interesting in terms of triggering a whole pile of things that I never thought about before. So thank you, Sarah Collins, and thank you to anybody that's watching, listening, interested. Don't be afraid to like and share, because somebody else might be interested too. You have a great day, and thanks again for your time and your kind attention for the animals.